Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Just quickly doing a mic check here. Can everyone hear me? Good morning, everyone. Can anyone hear me?
We can, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the January 10th, 2024 meeting of the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And Happy New Year to everyone. Before we begin, obviously, I am not in person in the boardroom at SANDAG today. And we've been coordinating with the clerk and with SANDAG Legal regarding my ability to participate remotely. And pursuant to California law, various exceptions apply, which allow members to participate remotely. However, a majority vote of the committee is required to allow me to participate in today's meeting virtually.
We actually don't need to take a vote for your participation because of the reason that you're participating remotely. I just have a couple of questions that I need you to verbally confirm for us, and then we can go ahead without a vote.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, do you want to do the interpretation first and then we'll take care of that so that it's translated as well?
Sure, fantastic. So at this time, I would like to ask our interpreter to walk through how to access interpretation services for today's meeting. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, from a cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, que se aparece como el globo terráqueo, y seleccione español. Si está utilizando la aplicación de móvil de Zoom, desde su celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, por favor pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we'll go back to the clerk to make sure that we are covered in terms of my virtual participation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like you to, if you could please state the reason for your virtual participation this morning without disclosing any medical information.
The reason is a family medical emergency.
Perfect. And just to clarify, because there are two different remote participation guidelines. So emergency does require a vote, but is this a general caretaking of a person or an actual emergency?
This is is related to an upcoming surgery that my wife is having. So it's general caretaking. I need to administer medication and do other things at the house today.
Perfect. And if you could also confirm that you are able to leave your camera on, and also that there is no one no one over the age of 18 in the room with you.
Correct, as to both.
Perfect. Then we can go ahead and proceed with the meeting. We'll just need you to leave your camera on as stated, and but you can mute yourself in between speaking if you'd like.
Okay, thank you so much, Francesca. Appreciate it. And thank you to my colleagues for allowing this hybrid format. I apologize for not being able to be with you in person. Also, before we begin, I see Frank has joined us, and we're very excited to have you join us, Frank. Sorry I'm not there to welcome you in person, but thank you so much for your participation, and we look forward very much to working with you. So I'll now ask our clerk to confirm that we have a quorum for today's meeting.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum this morning.
Thank you so much. Okay, and as always, thank you very much to staff for all of your efforts in pulling this meeting together. I just very quickly want to talk about how this meeting will work this morning. We will take in-person public comments followed by virtual public comments. If you're a member of the public here or in the room at SANDAG, please submit a speaker slip to the clerk. And for those joining virtually with me today, please continue to raise your virtual hand at the appropriate time. Both in-person and virtual public comments are possible at today's meeting. I want to ask SANDAG's financial analyst, Vanessa Leon, to provide a quick reminder on how the public and member comment will work this morning. Vanessa, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Frankel. We will take both in-person and virtual public comments as noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. In addition of emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email you receive upon registering. When public comments are called for on an item, on the Zoom platform, click on the raise hand icon on the Zoom toolbar. The chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you're participating by phone, press *9, and the chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether email or live, will be made a part of today's meeting record. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Okay, we'll move to our first item today, which is item number 1, which is public comments, communications, and member comments. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the committee on an item not on today's agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We do not have any public comments on this item.
Okay, so we'll move on to the agency report today. Do we have an agency report this morning?
Good morning, Chair Frankel. No real agency report. Just want to wish the committee members a happy new year. Obviously a busy year that's just kicked off with our new interim CEO, Colleen Clemenson. So we look forward to working with her as we look for a new CEO that we hope to have sometime in beginning of summer or so. So again, wishing everybody happy new year. And obviously, yes, a busy year for us right now. We're in the middle of finishing financial statements, getting the budget ready for the annual year. So although the year is just kicking off, staff is pretty busy. So we look forward to sharing with you our as things come along during the year, but no particular agency report to start off the year. Chair Frankel, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Dijon. We'll move on then to our consent agenda today. We have 4 items on consent. Are there any questions or comments on our consent items from members of the committee?
Jonathan, I would like to ask item 5 to be discussed a little bit. And I have a few questions.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Rosa Delgado. Would like item 5 to be pulled from consent. Any other items that the committee wishes to discuss? No, okay. So I think at this time I will just take ask the clerk if we have public comments on consent item 2, 3, or 4, and then Pedro, we can go ahead and move on to item 5. Madam Clerk.
We do not have any public comments on items 2, 3, or 4.
Thank you so much. Okay. Pedro, item 5, please go ahead.
On item 5, we have the TransNet quarterly status report, and you have these really colorful bar charts on a month-to-month basis. My question is, would it be possible to put a line that shows what the budgeted amount is on a month-to-month basis based on the projects?
You wanted a budget month to month? Or
If it's possible, I mean, whatever works out. I mean, I find great to see the draw, but I don't know how it compares against what you have budgeted.
okay. We could possibly do like an annual budget with that.
Whatever is simple so that I can do that
Okay,
on
sure.
these charts.
We'll do that for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No other comments.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other committee member comments on item 5? And yes, Sunny.
I just wanted to move to approve if there are no other comments.
Thank you. And quickly, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on item 5?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have public comment on item 5.
I'll make
Okay, excellent.
I'll make a motion. to
So excellent. So we have a motion to approve that would be item 2, a motion by Ms. House and second by Mr. Rivera. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. For biology environmental, Lorraine Alquist.
Motion to approve?
No.
Yes or no?
You either. approve or
Sorry,
not.
approved.
For CEO private sector, Sunny House.
Approve.
For contractor construction, Vice Chair Urso Delgado.
Yes.
For finance budgeting, Miriam Babaki.
Yes.
For licensed civil traffic engineer, Frank Rivera.
Approve.
For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve.
And for real estate right-of-way acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay. At this time, we'll move on to our report agenda, beginning with item 6. This is our local agency presentation. And we're very pleased to welcome Leah Cabrera with the City of Encinitas to provide an update on their local streets and roads program.
We're getting her up online for you. Leah, if you're online, we're trying to promote you as a panelist. Can you please accept?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Leah Cabrera. I'm a senior engineer at the City of Encinitas Engineering Department, specializing in the CIP department. And this is our 5-year snapshot of how we've been utilizing the TransNet funding. So here is a pie chart showing that in the orange, about 50% of our TransNet funding has been dedicated to our annual pavement rehabilitation project, where we perform slurry seals as well as mill and overlay throughout the city. Another greater part on the right side of the pie chart shows that 41% have been used towards our Streetscape Phase A, also known as our North Coast Highway 101 project, which is very important here in Encinitas, as that is a major tourist attraction here. Smaller portions of the TransNet funding have been utilized for the Luqadda Streetscape B&C striping project, as well as the other portion of our South Coast Highway 101 sidewalk upgrades, a B Street sidewalk project, which connects to the Moonlight Beach, State Beach, which is another great tourist attraction here in the city of Encinitas. And then a smaller portion was used towards this traffic signal fiber upgrade project. Next slide. Here we have a chart showing the yearly expenditures of our TransNet funding. We've increased from 2019, where we started with 1.2 million utilized, and in 2020, almost 3 million was utilized in TransNet funding for these projects. 2021, 3.5 million, and then 2022, 2.8 million. And to date in 2023, we've utilized 1.5, but we actually still have our annual street overlay project going on. So there'll be, it'll probably be closer to $3 million at the end of 2023 when that project wraps up. Next slide. Here we see the before and after of our South Coast Highway 101 street rehabilitation project. On the left, you can see the TransNet funding sign there. And then on the right was the finished project after the slurry. Next slide. This is our North Coast Highway 101 streetscape project, which is now complete. The total project was 9.2 million. Of that, almost 5 million of the funds came from TransNet. And this project, here we see it at El Portal, where we had an undercrossing for the railroad. And it also included a roundabout, improved sidewalks, and bicycle lanes with green painted bicycle lanes, as well as pedestrian upgrades to the ADA ramps and crosswalks. Next slide. Here we have another portion of the streetscape project at Marchetta Street, also on the Highway 101. On the right, you can see we have widened sidewalks and bike racks, as well as you can see some portions of the green painted bicycle lanes there as well. Next slide. Here's a drone shot of the before on the left and the after on the right. Or I'm sorry, these are both after with the green painted and the roundabout at El Portal, as well as you can see the undercrossing there for the railroad. Next slide, please. Another smaller project, as I mentioned, was the B Street Sidewalk project, which provides pedestrian access to Moonlight State Beach, another major tourist attraction in Encinitas. And here we upgraded the curb ramps for ADA, as well as installed curb gutter and sidewalk to better serve the pedestrians in the community. Next slide. Here we have a different portion of South Coast Highway 101. On the bottom, you can see that we improved the sidewalks using decorative sidewalk as well as pavers in the parking areas. And this project cost a little bit over $1 million, of which a quarter was funded from TransNet. Next slide. This is our Encinitas Community Park Offsite Improvements Project, which is also complete. It was almost $1 million, and a small portion, about almost $1,500, was used to improve the sidewalks, install curb and gutter, as well as curb ramps at this intersection. And next slide. That brings me to the conclusion. I'm open for questions, as well as my colleague, Matt Wadelski.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Cabrera. We appreciate you taking the time. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments on this item?
We do not have any public comments.
Okay, great. So we'll bring it back to committee members. Any questions or comments for the City of Encinitas?
I have a question, Jonathan.
Please go ahead, Sunny. Thank you.
I have a question on your last project. I was curious why such a small dollar amount, $100. How did that come about?
Matt, can you answer that question?
Absolutely. Hope everybody can hear me. I'm Matt Wadelsky, Principal Engineer at the City of Encinitas. Leah and I work together. The project was obviously putting a sidewalk in. It was completed near the very beginning of this, the range of this report. And it was a portion that could help out on a curb ramp. That was why we needed it there.
So
The rest was city fund.
Okay, so it was only eligible for 1,400, or was it a pool of funds that was for eligibility? I'm just curious the division of the transit funds.
If you want, we can get back to you specifically. I can't specifically answer that right now. Okay. I apologize.
All right, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Frank.
Yes, the City of Encinitas, how do you prioritize missing sidewalks and missing pedestrian ramps versus sidewalk repairs? Because I saw a couple of projects where you're putting in new sidewalk, but how do you prioritize those and missing pedestrian ramps versus just doing sidewalk repairs, focusing on TransNet?
Well, a lot of times we'll pick up the missing sidewalk or curb ramp repairs with our annual paving project, just because it makes better financial sense if the contractor is already going to be in the area. Sometimes projects for sidewalks will come from a school or council members. I think that B Street sidewalk project in particular was initiated because it is such a heavily traveled section of the street to Moonlight Beach.
Okay, so does the public have like a petition process that they submit, or this is just goes through the elected officials?
I don't think there's a formal petition project, but there's definitely, we take in public comments, and of course, those get traveled up to our public officials. And when we're prioritizing projects, we get direction that way.
Do you have a sidewalk master plan?
I believe so.
Leah, you want me to help?
Yeah.
I'd be happy to. Yes, the city does have a mobility master plan. Mobility was a goal that recent and previous councils have adopted and stressed that the city staff pursue. Obviously, with trying to have more alternative modes, bicycle and pedestrian, not just vehicle. So the city does pursue that. When the annual budget does come up, we always look for, how we can improve mobility. When we have private development projects, we always look for a sidewalk. If a development is right next to a road that does not have curb gutter sidewalk, we try to condition that to happen. Usually it comes with more use. If we look at areas that are near schools, areas that are close to heavy corridors, our Luqadda streetscape was a big one. We are putting a corridor project now on Santa Fe Drive next to San Dieguito Academy. We try as much as we can to look for the big areas where we can get bang for the buck.
All right,
these are our mobility master plans.
Jonathan, this is Pedro. Were you done?
Yes.
Hi, my question is on the chart that you have the annual TransNet funds utilized. It goes back to my previous question. What is your budget allocation that you get from TransNet? And have you been utilizing it all, or do you have a carryover year over year? And if so, is there any reason why you're having that carryover or something that's impeding you from utilizing your funds?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we do have a projected amount, and we try to utilize it all. the majority in our annual pavement rehabilitation project. And that's combined with SB1 funding. But as you know, with construction costs fluctuating, it's hard to kind of pin that target. So I'm wary of putting together a project that may bid at the total amount in case it goes higher than the bid. So I do kind of try to give a buffer. And so there is a small amount of carryover every year, just because it's hard to, we don't have city funding to put towards that pavement rehabilitation project. So it's hard to gauge it. I don't want to put together a project that I estimate will use up all of the TransNet funding in case it goes over.
Do you have any challenges, in your opinion, utilizing the TransNet funds, or anything that's preventing you from doing that?
I don't have challenges at all. We're very grateful to have the funding for our annual overlay project. It's much needed.
I appreciate that, because sometimes we hear from other agencies that they do have challenges. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
And Pedro, just to clarify, so on an annual basis, they receive about $2.5 million of TransNet local streets and roads.
Okay, other committee member questions for the city of Encinitas?
Yes, I have a question in regards to the pedestrian and bikeway improvements that you've done. Is there an overall plan to have connectivity for the public for both pedestrian and bikeway improvements?
I can take that. We as we said, we have master plans. We have bicycle plans through the city. We have, council members and various organizations in the city that are very adamant about trying to put bicycle and pedestrian facilities where as much as possible. Requests come a lot of times, as Leah Cabrera said, when we do our overlay work, we will restripe a road to allow a bike lane if there wasn't a bike lane before, as long as there's adequate width. So there are active plans specifically in the city that we try as much as we can. We use striping, we use private development, we have CIP capital improvement projects where we look at this. We always look for grants. We use SANDAG funding. We try to use general fund for as much as we can. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's helpful. And then from a public review standpoint, since parking typically is pretty constrained within these areas, is there a public outreach or an informational meeting that's associated when you do these improvements, or do you just kind of do an adjunct on what the existing project is and not go through a public review process?
When we have changes to parking, and obviously in the Coastal Commission, we make sure we follow those requirements. When we have formal traffic and capital improvement projects where we're changing things, we have public outreach meetings for all the projects that we do. And as much as possible, we try to solicit public input about what the community wants and does not want.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, any additional questions for the city of Encinitas? All right, no, seeing none. Thank you so much again to the city for making the time to come in and speak with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll move on to item number 7, which is updates to the proposed amendments to the TransNet extension ordinance. And related to the ITALK membership and selection process. And I will be presenting this item. So I think, as most of the committee members know, one of the primary responsibilities of the ITALK is to perform the triennial performance audit, our TPA. And as part of the triennial performance audit, we not only look at, of course, expenditures and the TransNet grant programs, major corridors, et cetera, but we also look at the functioning of the ITALK itself. And as part of our effort to respond to previous triennial performance audit recommendations by our independent auditor, we presented to the board of directors ordinance amendments that we believe were consistent with those recommendations related to the composition of the ITALK and the membership selection process. Unfortunately, those amendments were not agreed to by the 2/3 majority of the board. We fell short by a couple of votes on the tally vote. And so subsequently, we formed a subcommittee that consisted of myself, Ms. House, and Mr. Orso Delgado to evaluate our next steps and what we would be doing moving forward. And attached to our agenda packet today is the results of the subcommittee's work, which is revisions to our suggested ordinance amendments. And in addition to meeting as a subcommittee, I also met with 4 members of the board, including the chair, and 3 members who did not support the item initially at our first go round at the board of directors. And so we had an opportunity to brief those members, those board members, on the purpose of these ordinance amendments and generally understand any questions or concerns that they had. I think the board members, generally speaking, understood what we were working to achieve and were supportive of an efficient and effective ITALK. So at this time, we're bringing the item back to the committee for further discussion, with the hopes that we would seek a recommendation that the amendments as proposed by the subcommittee would be advanced to the board for further discussion. And the last thing I'll mention is related to the selection committee process and makeup. And we spent a significant amount of time discussing how we should present this to the board. And as you can see in the attachment to our agenda packet, what we concluded was that the current ordinance requires that a mayor be a delegate to the selection committee. And as we all know, and as Pedro astutely mentioned to the subcommittee, it is sometimes the case that mayors no longer serve as the representative from their city to the SANDAG board. And so as a result, we would have a mayor that would sit on the selection committee that was actually not a member of the SANDAG board and not involved at SANDAG. And so for that reason, we felt that that was not appropriate. And instead, we would simply recommend that there would be one primary representative and one alternate representative, which is consistent with how our member agencies select their representatives to the SANDAG board. So it would be identical to the SANDAG board selection process at the local level. And hopefully the primary and the alternate delegate, for efficiency purpose, would allow staff to obtain a quorum for these meetings, which in the past we have struggled to obtain, having to regularly cancel meetings. And so hopefully having the alternate will avoid that and allow us to fill seats more effectively. So that concludes my presentation on the item, and want to, before we go to committee member comment, just want to ask the clerk if there's any public comments on this item.
Thank you, Chair. We have no public comments.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to community members. And I don't know if either Sunny or Pedro, as subcommittee members, have anything to add to this item, but want to bring it back for discussion and a potential recommendation.
No comments, Jonathan.
I have one question, Frank Rivera. On the membership and selection process, we're going to go from a group of 7 ITALK members to 9. And I wanted to have a discussion that there's no transportation planning or planner experience that's on any of the positions. Was there a reason not to have someone with transportation planning background, not necessarily an engineer, but someone in the planning field?
Sure. So I think that the additional seats, one would be an expert in emerging transportation technology, and 2 would be a transportation user. That was the result of significant discussion at the subcommittee level prior to this. I should say an original subcommittee that was prior to the formation of this, our current subcommittee. So our current subcommittee was formed subsequent to the vote, the most recent vote at the board, where this item did not pass. So I know that we had in our triennial performance audit discussions about increasing the membership. And I do know that I would think that there would be within the existing category, the traffic engineer or the licensed engineer, both of those categories, I would think are heavily involved in the planning of infrastructure projects. Although you're correct, Frank, there is no specific seat that is reserved just for transportation planning. And I don't know that there was any magic to that. I don't know that this had come up before, but as I'm looking at the categories, I would think that there would be some overlap with those other two seats.
Jonathan, if I can add, I think the thought process, although we have kind of expanded one category, was to maintain previous categories intact as much as possible and only focus on the two additional. For the licensed engineer and industry professional, in that thought process, we did look at a revision because we thought construction management and program management was a more emerging and newer industry that was not considered at the time when ordinance was developed. So in that case, we did revise it. Frank brings up a good point. I think maybe that category is more in the biology or environmental sciences, which is part of the planning process. So I'm not sure if that was the intention of the original ordinances, to include that as an expertise in the process of developing a project. But that's a good point Frank brings up as well.
And this is Pedro. I also believe, Frank, that if you look at the two added categories, it does not preclude from someone that it's in the planning arena to participate in these, given or assuming that they have the expertise that we're seeking. So they're not being precluded, they're not singled out, but I think they're nested within the other items, Frank.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from committee members on this item? No? Okay. Seeing none, well, we are seeking a recommendation and a motion to recommend approval of an advancement of these amendments to the board of directors. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend that the board of directors approve the updated TransNet extension ordinance amendments specific to the membership makeup and selection process for the ITALC. Rivera.
I'll second that.
Thank you so much. We have a motion by Mr. Rivera and a second by Mr. Orso Delgado. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. For biology environmental, Lorraine Alquist. Approve. For CEO private sector, Sunny House.
Approved.
For contractor construction, Vice Chair Orso Delgado.
Yes.
For finance and budgeting, Mariam Babaki. Yes. For licensed civil traffic engineer, Frank Rivera.
Approve.
For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Yes.
And for real estate right-of-way acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll now move on to item number 8 today, which is the 2023 RTIP program amendment number 9. And this item will be presented by Mr. Radcliffe. Good morning, Richard.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ITALC members. Item 8 is amendment number 9 to the 2023 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP. On January 19th, the SANDAG Transportation Committee is expected to approve amendment number 9. And the ITALC is asked today to provide feedback on the proposed amendment, focusing its review on the TransNet funded projects. Amendment number 9 is a regular quarterly formal RTIP amendment that's being processed to accommodate various changes to projects requested by SANDAG, Caltrans, several local agencies, MTS, and NCTD. Attachment 1, beginning on page 40 of today's agenda, is the summary of changes report, showing prior and revised project costs, the cost difference, and the percent change in each project. The table has been sorted in descending order by the absolute value of the change in dollars. Some key changes in this amendment include the programming updates, some programming updates based on the FY 2024 SANDAG program budget amendments approved by the board on October 27th, 2023, as well as programming updates requested by several of the local agencies. In attachment 2, beginning on page 44, you'll find the changes proposed in this amendment specifically for the projects funded with TransNet. Each project table shows TransNet at the top of the funding section, followed by any other funding that is programmed on the project. These tables also show the TransNet subtotals and other funding subtotals to show you just how much TransNet and other funds are programmed. Attachment 3 on page 85 shows any changes that were made during the public comment period. And then attachment 4A is the TransNet programming analysis that shows changes in the TransNet LSI and LSI carryover that's programmed between this amendment and the previous formal amendment. In this case, the last formal amendment was amendment number 5, which was presented to this committee at the July 12th, 2023 meeting. And attachment 4B shows how agencies are making progress with programming their available LSI and LSI carryover. And finally, attachment number 5 summarizes the TransNet eligibility requirements analysis conducted for amendment number 9. That concludes my report, and I'll be happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Radcliffe, for your report. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
We have no public comments.
Okay, we'll bring it back then to committee members for questions or comments on this RTIP amendment. Yes, Les.
Thank you very much. And Richard, thanks for the presentation. I just had a question. You mentioned that some of the items had been updated after the public comment period. So could you give a quick overview? Were there any significant changes per public input?
No, the changes that were made were primarily just revising fund types. I'm looking here. They're reflected in the current change summary, the attachment 1, but there was an increase of $3 million to the I-15 SR-78 managed lane connectors. And then for the SR-52, the operational improvements, there was an increase of $3 million there. And those are within the constraints for the modifications that are allowed during public comment.
Thank you.
I have a question. Assuming, and sometimes that's dangerous of me to do, that it's a zero sum game, the 95.4 million of TransNet dollars that are increased, where is it coming from to cover that if there's no additional funds?
So I can answer that. So as part of our budget amendment that we took to the board in October and brought to ITALK in November, we shared that we actually had a carryover from previous years of about $88 million of TransNet because we did so well last year above what we had expected. So because we thought we were not going to do well, we didn't spend as much. So we actually, revenues went up quite a bit, about I think 6% about that. And so we did have a balance that we could then spend in our budget from our balance, not from future revenues.
So if what you're telling me, you had 88 million carryover, you're still short another 7?
That was unprogrammed TransNet funds in FY24.
So you were able to cover everything?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could just add to, I did mistakenly use a prior amendment, basically an incorrect template for providing or preparing the change summary. So it was missing the breakout of exactly what makes up that 95 million by TransNet type. And I do have that here. So in this amendment, the TransNet major corridors increased by about 73.8 million. The local streets improvements funds went up by about 22 million. I think it's the BPNS, the bike ped neighborhood safety TransNet funding went down by 2.2 million. And then the Smart Growth Incentive Program TransNet went up by about 1.8 million, so totaling that 95.4.
Okay, thank you. I mean, in the future, it would be really, really nice to get in the report, something as similar as what Michelle just said.
Yep.
Thank you.
I have a question, Richard. Although you just said the bicycle program went down, some of the, individual projects here or groups seem like to have had significant increases. Can you explain, did the scope change, or are these as a result of the delays and inflation? What are the causes of some of these large increases?
So it just depends on the project. I know that for the BPNS, it's generally if there's an overall, this is an overall increase or decrease, these numbers. So it's usually because the amount by which the fund type increased overall in the RTIP amendment doesn't exceed the amount by which it decreases, then it will show an overall decrease for that fund type.
Right, but individually, let's say this project, City of San Diego SD 166, it's a 71% increase. So, that's a large increase to go from 28 million to 48 million.
So that project, as an example, if you may recall, the city had for several amendment cycles, they had a large, they were over-programmed, and they had to take an opportunity in an upcoming amendment to basically kind of reconcile their programming and adjust their balances and where their funding is allocated over their different projects. And that's what they did in this amendment. So they did have, while they had a large negative in the first 2 years of the RTIP, they were able to get rid of that and reduce their large 5-year positive balance by doing things like programming this $20 million on SD 166. And then there were other projects where they had more, like SD 96 on the second page of attachment 1, and then SD 49, you can see those, the increase on 96 kind of offsets the decrease on 49 for the most part. But those are LSI funds, so that's basically their programming based off of the revenue that they have planned for their agency.
But does this mean that, if you're increasing 20 million to one particular project, is that because it's a limited pool of funds? So is that taken away from delivery of other projects? I know they're reprogramming and shuffling money around basically. So is that at the detriment of other projects that are not being delivered because one project has gone up so much?
It could be, yeah. And that's decided at the jurisdictional level, where they decide periodically when we get new revenue estimates and we give them to them, then they are able to determine how they want to distribute those across their projects for the 5 years.
So SANDAG doesn't have any say or influence in making sure the program's still being delivered and other projects are not really being delayed further beyond what was programmed originally. I mean, we're only looking at numbers here, but what are the impacts of these decisions on the delivery of the entire bike program? That's kind of what my question is.
Well, like the local projects, we don't have really any control over how they're allocating their TransNet funding. We do with our BPNS funding on our bike projects. But yes, the local agencies, they will, from time to time, redetermine their priorities. And that's often what you see. And so here, basically, they did have a large balance, the city, and they made more of a use of that. And in attachment 4A and 4B, I believe 4B specifically is the one where you can see that so the city, they had previously a negative $13 million balance, basically showing they were over-programmed by that much. They had more programmed than they had revenue coming in that period, and now they have a $200,000 positive balance. Don't know if that helps answer your question.
Okay.
Sunny, if I may.
Yeah.
One of the things that, within the cities or within Caltrans or any agency that's utilizing these funds, the last thing they want to do is to come to SANDAG and let them know that they are short. So what they will do, what I used to do both at Caltrans and at the city of Santee is first look within my allocation and see if there were any other budget within my whole scope of projects that I could plug into that specific project that went up. If I couldn't do that, then I would look at the second case scenarios. Can I downscope the project to a point that it's still the same project, but I'm not utilizing the total amount of money? And then the third and most painful one is to come back to SANDAG and say, hey, I need more money because now I'm at the mercy of them doing the whole thing for the entire program and looking at whether or not there's a budget capacity, because like you said, it's a zero-sum game. And I think Frank can help me on this because he just left the city and he probably knows better than I do.
I do have a comment on that, and that's true because what would happen is the various funds that a local agency will use for their capital program all have different restrictions and timely use of funds. And that's the purpose why we saw the previous item or this item on the RTIP amendments is that things happen. Generally for us, the unexpected is you try to schedule a project out. Utilities always is a wild card. And once that starts hitting your schedule and you have a project that cannot be done during the winter and you're losing your window, then you start moving funds around so that you don't sit on funds. And that was what I would try to do as manager of the CIP program funding to try to get projects out the door. So if the funds were not going to be used in time, then we would go back to our city council with an amendment to the CIP, explain why projects were getting moved around or the funding was getting moved around. But the main purpose was a TransNet dollar that came in was going to go out in the same fiscal year as we wanted it to, but maybe it was on a different project that a construction schedule was able to be met. So it is a balancing act that we're constantly looking at.
Thank you very much. I appreciate both of you with for the explanation. Richard, I have one more question. The bus stop layover facility, that wasn't necessarily a designated transit ordinance project. What funds covers that? Is that from the transit portion? And how did that get on a TransNet eligible, become a transit eligible project?
So I'll take that one.
Okay, Michelle.
So it's a combination of federal funding, the RSTP funding, and TransNet major corridor funding. So what it was determined is that, yes, that specific project is not specifically in the ordinance. However, the rapid routes that do end up there, they are.
So it's part of the major corridor program.
Correct. It's part of the major corridor funding because all the rapid routes end up in that one location. And so the thought was, all the rapid routes will rest there, and that way they don't have to spend more time, going back and forth or just not resting anywhere. So it was brought into the major corridor program as part of that.
Okay. Okay. And who decides that? Is that the board?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Richard, I have a question, which is, what is the process by which a local agency would request an amendment to RTIP, and kind of how frequently does that happen? I know it may be quarterly or some other frequency, but how do jurisdictions request amendments?
Sure. So basically, agencies cannot make amendments to projects outside of an amendment cycle. So we basically, every 6 months, we typically process a formal amendment, such as this one here, where there's generally not really any restrictions on what types of changes can be made. And that usually, most of the time, it's amounts that funding is increasing or decreasing by that are usually the determining factors as to what kind of amendment they're included in. We try to stagger our amendments. So the next ones that this committee will probably see until, I would say, July, when we come back with our next formal amendment, like this one, that will include the this upcoming budget, any updates in there that need to be programmed. But typically, agencies they don't always, not every single agency always participates in every amendment cycle. It's kind of random. And, typically the only times that we really see all agencies kind of getting involved is whenever we have new revenue estimates and they have to update their programming across their projects to make sure that they, by fiscal year, are not programming more than what they have available in anticipated revenue. Another exception would be every 2 years when we do an RTIP update, all the agencies need to participate at that time to make sure that for the next 5-year period that the new RTIP will be looking at and covering, that all of their projects that they will be funding in those 5 years are brought over and included in that RTIP. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. And so here we had unprogrammed funds and additional revenues that come in. So basically, as the fiscal year moves along, revenues come in. If it exceeds expectations, the agencies are made aware of that and say, "Hey, we have more money. Would you like? We anticipate your share will therefore increase." And so now's the time to make these adjustments.
Yep. And also, if an agency receives federal funding for a project, it has to be programmed generally in the RTIP. So we'll work with them on that. But as far as selection of projects, that's something that usually happens at a local level, with constituents working with the city council and commenting and providing feedback at that level.
Thank you. Okay, any other member comments on this item?
The only other thing that I will add is that SANDAG does a wonderful job at balancing all of this because it's very fluid, because you also have grant cycles and other sources of funding that come in throughout the year. And, it's like changing, it's all the time. So, kudos to them.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that's a great segue. That concludes this item. We will move on to item number 9, which is the Specialized Transportation Grant Program, Cycle 13, Call for Projects Kickoff. And this item will be presented by Zachary Rivera.
All right. Yes, it is indeed a great segue. Good morning, Chair, and Happy New Year, members of the iTalk. Ali Vasquez who will help present the next item, and I serve as the program managers of the Specialized Transportation Grant Program, or STGP. For this item, I'm here to introduce the STGP Cycle 13 Call for Projects. So one of iTalk's responsibilities is to provide input on the selection criteria used to score proposed senior mini grant projects. The purpose of this item is to give you information you can use to help the region identify the criteria that best meets its needs. Today, I'll provide an overview of the SCGP and the Cycle 13 Call for Projects, review the evaluation criteria used in the prior cycle, describe what other regions are doing, highlights initial stakeholder feedback, and discuss next steps. But first, let me set the stage by describing our region's changing demographics. According to data from the American Community Survey, 10.5% of the region's total civilian non-institutionalized population was estimated to be disabled in 2021, or about 333,000 people. Additionally, SANDAG estimates that 16% of the region's population, or about 529,000 people, were 65 and older in 2021. By 2050, SANDAG forecasts that the population 65 and older will increase to about 808,000 people, or 22% of the population. As the older adult population is expected to increase by 53% by 2050, SANDAG and other agencies have an opportunity to address the changing specialized transportation needs of our region. So it is against this backdrop that specialized transportation becomes even more important for our region. So what is it? SANDAG has defined specialized transportation to mean a broad range of transportation-related services to improve mobility for older adults and individuals with disabilities when fixed route public transit is insufficient, unavailable, or inappropriate. One of the ways SANDAG is addressing the region's specialized transportation needs is through the Specialized Transportation Grant Program, or STGP. Let me start with a brief overview of the program and an introduction to the Cycle 13 call for projects. The current goal of the STGP is to improve mobility for older adults and individuals with disabilities by delivering effective, equitable, environmentally responsible, and coordinated transportation solutions in our region. Through the STGP, we provide funding through the Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 program and the TransNet Senior Mini Grant program. Eligible applicants include nonprofit organizations and local governmental agencies, including local jurisdictions. While there are similarities between both funding sources, there are some differences too. The Section 5310 program administered by SANDAG funds projects that improve mobility for older adults 65 and older and individuals with disabilities in the urbanized areas of San Diego County. The Senior Mini Grant program funds projects that focus on older adults 60 and over throughout the region. And there are 3 eligible grant types under the SDGP: mobility management, operating, and capital. Mobility management grants consist of activities that improve coordination among public transit and other transportation service providers. Eligible mobility management grants include information referral services as well as travel training. Operating grants consist of activities to operate, manage, and maintain a transportation service for older adults and individuals with disabilities. Eligible operating grants include volunteer driver programs. And lastly, capital projects consist of the acquisition of contracted transportation services or the purchase of property such as accessible vehicles. Mobility management and operating grants are eligible under both the Senior Mini Grant and Section 5310 programs, whereas capital grants are only eligible under the Section 5310 program. About every 2 years, SANDAG holds a competitive process or call for projects to distribute available STGP funding. Since the program started in 2006, we have awarded over $63 million over 12 call for project cycles. We currently estimate that there will be about $9.2 million available through the Cycle 13 call for projects. The forecasted increase is due to the bipartisan infrastructure law, which bolstered Section 5310 funding, as represented by the orange dotted line. So to determine how this finite funding should be allocated, SANDAG sets project selection criteria from which proposed applications are scored during the competitive process. The ITALC, as mentioned earlier, and the Transportation Committee are responsible for providing input on the criteria that is ultimately approved by the SANDAG Board of Directors. To help the ITALC, Transportation Committee, and region make informed decisions, staff reviewed the existing criteria, conducted a literature review and benchmarking analysis, and began engaging stakeholders. Another key component will be the fiscal year 24 TransNet triennial performance audit. Any recommendations pertaining to the Senior Mini Grant program may also inform the criteria. Let's start with the existing criteria, which is from the last cycle, the Cycle 12 call for projects. There are 8 criteria categories used in the Cycle 12 call for projects. The first 3 categories collectively comprised 50% of the total possible points, with operational/implementation plan weighted the highest. Details on these criteria are on the STGP webpage. Since the Section 5310 program is nationwide, it's national, we can explore what other regions are doing with respect to their Section 5310 programs and criteria. So to gain insight, staff performed a literature review and benchmarking analysis, which is also available on the SDGP webpage. Staff analyzed 2 recent studies about the National Section 5310 program. In 2021, the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center published a Section 5310 program compendium, which highlighted best practices. In 2022, the Transportation Research Board published a study on the administration of the Section 5310 program throughout the county. The study found that, quote, the level of need for transportation, particularly for services that enhance mobility for older adults and individuals with disabilities, is so great that the program cannot meet demand and applications routinely surpass the available funding. The study also found that while the Section 5310 program is often oversubscribed, program managers have generally focused on streamlining administrative processes rather than reduce the number of grantees awarded. So SANDAG also conducted a benchmarking analysis by identifying 8 regions that have comparable Section 5310 apportionments to SANDAG's and comparing their selection criteria. From the 9 studied regions, including San Diego's, 53 selection criteria were found. To decipher themes and analyze the proportional weights assigned by these regions, staff combined similar criteria into 9 simplified categories as shown on the right side of the screen. Staff looked at the prevalence of each of these simplified criteria across the regions studied. Staff identified coordination as the most common selection criteria found in 8 of the 9 regions analyzed, including San Diego. Overall, staff found that the themes of the Cycle 12 criteria were consistent with the 8 other regions studied. Staff also analyzed the 9 simplified criteria by the average weights assigned to each criterion across the regions, comparing those to what we have at SANDAG. Staff found that coordination was not only the most prevalent criterion, but it was also given the most weight by the selected regions. Performance measures and service effectiveness was the criterion given the second most weight. Another critical component is stakeholder feedback to make sure any project selection criteria is responsive to the region's needs. To initiate the Cycle 13 call, staff began engaging stakeholders in October of 2023. On October 10th, 2023, SANDAG held an SDGP Cycle 13 Call for Projects kickoff meeting attended by more than 50 stakeholders, including specialized transportation, riders, and providers. Following the kickoff meeting, staff presented the SANDAG Mobility Working Group, the SANDAG Social Equity Working Group, and 3 other regional stakeholder groups focused on specialized transportation. Staff also engaged stakeholders through e-blasts, social media, and the SDGP webpage. Through these efforts, over 100 stakeholders were engaged and more than 100 comments were received. So from this initial feedback, 5 themes on the region's specialized transportation needs emerged. 1, affordability. 2, flexibility/on-demand service. 3, service quality. 4, coordination. And lastly, 5th, affordability. Staff also asked stakeholders what, if anything, should be changed to improve the SDGP goal. While some thought no changes were needed at all, others suggested that references to dependability, affordability, and on-demand service be included. A summary of the initial stakeholder engagement is also on the SDGP webpage. So to recap, we've discussed the existing criteria, what other regions are doing, what we've heard from stakeholders so far. To wrap up, let's discuss where we go from here. So on January 19th, staff anticipates presenting this item to the Transportation Committee and can relay any feedback you have today. Next, on February 7th, we plan to hold SDGP Cycle 13 Call for Projects workshop to focus specifically on the selection criteria and gather further stakeholder input. In the March to April timeframe, staff expects to return to SANDAG working groups and other stakeholder groups, soliciting feedback on this selection criteria. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, a draft report of the fiscal year 2024 TransNet triennial performance audit is expected to be released in March of 2024, and that may also inform the criteria. And then with all this feedback, staff anticipates returning to you at your May 8th meeting with refined project selection criteria for discussion and possible action. Staff then plans to present to the Transportation Committee at its May 17th meeting. Depending on the outcomes of those meetings, staff plans to present the criteria to the SANDAG board in May or June, teeing up the release of the call for projects on July 1st, which would then open a 90-day application window. And lastly, I'll note that SANDAG plans to conduct a regional specialized transportation needs assessment in fiscal year 2025. This assessment, which responds to prior iTalk member comments, would identify how many older adults and individuals with disabilities need specialized transportation services, where they live, and where they need to go. For example, we could transform a map of where older adults live in the region into a map that shows their travel patterns and critical connections. While the assessment results would not be available for the Cycle 13 call, they could inform the subsequent calls for projects related to specialized transportation. So in closing, I look forward to engaging with you over the next several months as we refine the criteria and continue to develop the Cycle 13 call. Check out our webpage and please follow up, reach out if you have any questions, feedback during the ensuing months. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair and willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Mr. Rivera. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. We do have one public comment on this item. Tim Bilash, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, committee. My name is Timothy Bilash. Hello again. I am representing myself as a candidate for U.S. Congress in District 50 today. I call attention to this report, thank you, for the project selection criteria process slide. I do not see where the SANDAG CEO is present in this criteria process. Would be interested in a clarification. I heard the chair of the board complain at a recent meeting that the board was overburdened with communications, and I feel the CEO can provide some help with that. If I may add, my apologies, I did not get to add a public comment for the previous item 8 that I feel would support the comments I heard from members. I had raised my hand at the beginning of the item, but I only had about 10 seconds to realize that it had become unraised. And this is the second time this has happened to me on a Zoom meeting. And the clerk was asked if there are any comments from the public, but I only had about 10 seconds, raised my hand immediately, and no one seemed to notice. So if I may make a quick comment about the previous presentation, that would be appreciated. I've seen the accounting and auditing reports presented at SANDAG meetings and sometimes feel I have to be a master accountant to understand the listings. It takes a lot of time to understand these numbers. I appreciate all the members and staff attempts at this. Is there some way to provide an explanation panel, which I would echo the members' comments about this, maybe a bubble or something? I know they're PDFs. For example, on the first page of the slide report of the summary, the numbers and the abbreviations, and on the third line with the 75% increased budget, the TIRP, TransNet-MC, TIFIA, these use of abbreviations makes it difficult. And if there's some way to provide some narrative in these reports that would make it easier for the public or other members, That would save a lot of time and maybe time taken up in the meetings. So I appreciate the members for raising the issues they did that I was thinking about also. And I thank the SANDAG staff for their continued efforts and the important information they make available to us.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Okay, we will go back to committee members for questions or comments from Mr. Rivera.
Frank, did you have a comment?
I have a comment or a question. Zachary, you mentioned, I see that in a lot of the, in your presentation, one of the things that was very clear, and in your benchmarking study, et cetera, what was considered coordination. And what does that mean in this context?
Yeah, thank you for the follow-up. So coordination refers to a couple different things for different agencies. A lot for the 5310 program, one of the requirements is that projects have to be derived from a locally developed coordinated plan. What that means is it looks at an assessment of the transportation needs of the region and looks at strategies to address the specialized transportation needs of a local region. So that's a federal requirement. So what the criteria reflects in a lot of the regions is that the degree to which projects support a local coordinated plan. So that's one area. The second area is just general coordination of services so that there's not duplicative services and that the most effective services can be provided. Hopefully that helps to answer your question.
Jonathan, I have, I guess, a comment. It's not so much a question. And please don't take it the wrong way. I've been dealing throughout this past year with elder care with my mother, my brother, and my sister. And I have found it to be pitiful in the sense of how the elderly are left to be fend for themselves when it becomes through their health care, coordinating with the county when it comes to getting social workers. The county has two separate agencies and they act independent of each other, although they do the same work. They don't communicate with each other and one blames the other one and so on and so forth. When it comes to transportation, mobility for the elderly and also the disabled, it's also very, very hard for a senior citizen to program rides when they need to go to appointments. One of the things that I think should become really important with these programs is making it not only accessible, but user-friendly to the elderly who are fending for themselves and also reliable. I have had numerous instances, not, thank God, not for my mother because we don't utilize the service, but friends of her and colloquial that we hear where the senior is left stranded because they're not picked up. So the other thing that I think is also very, very critical is the performance measure of these systems and the coordination of who is managing the system for the elderly. Because, and I'm sorry to say this, but the county is not a very good keeper. So I'll just get off my soapbox now.
Can I
Thank
continue?
you for that comment, Pedro. And I don't know if you had any thoughts about the selection criteria that are included, were included in the cycle 12 call for projects, but I'm wondering based on your comments, Pedro, Zach, if there are any, as to accessibility, usability, affordability, is that kind of embedded within the proposed performance criteria, or do any of our existing selection criteria address the concerns that Pedro just raised?
There are performance measures built into the program, mostly has to do with the number of hours of service, the rate at which the target population is being served, and the number of trips provided. But something that we're exploring for the next cycle and was reflected in prior stakeholder engagement efforts is the reliability of service, affordability, and how user-friendly is it. So this is something that we're exploring, and I anticipate we'll hear more when we do further stakeholder engagement.
I'd like to really echo what Pedro was saying. I also have cared for both my parents. One of my parents who has passed away, and the other one is also declining in terms of availability of transportation and mobility. And I must say, if we children were not around, I don't know what would have happened to them. They are completely relying on their kids, ourselves, to arrange, call, and make sure that they are taken care of. And it did happen in one occasion where all the siblings we were out of town, and my father was left to his own devices and could not care for himself. It was for the grace of God that a friend of mine arrived, and she just noticed that there was something wrong and took care of it. So maybe in terms of the user-friendly, it's really important to look at it from the elders' point of view, not for us that are sitting around the table, but what does it take for them to have access and be able to communicate and a lot of them at that age, they are not computer savvy, they cannot easily navigate their phones for access. So that is very real. The accessibility and the user friendliness is a very real issue.
I have a couple of questions, kind of tagging on the performance. Are there ways of getting feedback from the users? Do you do surveys? And most of the time people, if you just send an email for a survey, people don't answer. And those people don't necessarily go to the public outreach program. So how do you find out if the system is working or not?
Yeah, and that's exactly, that was in the cycle 12 criteria, is one of the last ones, is performance measures, performance outcomes, and how applicants propose to take input and then reflect their programs based off of that input. So that's something that was part of the criteria the last time and is evaluated by evaluators.
But you rely on the applicants to give you that information, and how true or how it's subjective is that information?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely rely on applicants to provide us that information. We also do hear from writers directly, but it's more ad hoc. Different services.
Yeah. So maybe that's something to be considered. You can sit there and boast about all the things you've done in an application, but true reality of what people are experiencing might be different. So if there's a different way, a mechanism for maybe the children of those parents that are not, get online and say, hey, this is not working or something like that might be helpful. The other thing, Zach, was the coordination. I had a similar question and you answered partly, but for the criteria, the evaluation of the criteria, are you, do you put the the onus on the applicant to identify all the coordination criteria, or as a region, you do that? How does that work?
Yeah, so the coordination component is we have our own coordinated plan, and they have to find in the coordinated plan how the project is derived from it. So the different strategies. So they have to identify that, and then they have to expand on that to say how specifically will you coordinate with different entities.
I see. Okay, very good. Thank you for doing this. I love the information that came along. You know, we're all probably part of that group of, you know, within the 2050 timeline. And this is seems very necessary. I appreciate you all doing the research that you're doing to continue to improve this program.
And if I might also say, the needs assessment might address some of the concerns about what you're talking about.
That's great. Thank you.
Hey, Zach, I just had one, additional comment. This has been a really good discussion, and your presentation was excellent. Thank you for looking into what kind of similarly situated agencies are doing with their criteria. It's really helpful for us to know how similar or dissimilar we are here in San Diego. I think for me, providing kind of actionable feedback, relative to the actual evaluation criteria and the respective weight of each one of those criterion that we used in the cycle 12 is what I would hope to do. And so based on this discussion, this performance monitoring, reporting, and outcomes, I really do think that we should be more outcome focused in encouraging all the applicants to engage with their users and maybe the children of their users, amongst others. But so, that 10% weight on that criteria seems low to me. We have 20% double the weight on the operational and implementation plan. So we're more focused on the planning, but really not as focused, I should say, on the execution. And, a good plan really is meaningless unless there's good execution. So I think that performance monitoring, reporting, and outcome criterion should be weighted more heavily. I don't know exactly what the right number is. Probably closer to the 20% as opposed to 10%.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? No, seeing none. Okay, again, thank you so much, Mr. Rivera, for your presentation. And at this time, we will move on to item number 10, sticking with grant programs here. This is the TransNet grant programs, the biannual status update, and we'll hear from Ali Vasquez on this item.
Good morning, everyone. What a great, I couldn't have asked for a better introduction for, for our TransNet grant program update for you all. I'm here today. I'm Ali Vasquez, and as Zach mentioned previously, I help to administer the senior mini grant. Zach works on the competitive side, and I work on the active monitoring of our grantees. I'm here to present our biennial status update for you all, along with my colleagues, Lauren and Jenny here. So, all right, green means go. All right, so I'm going to pass the mic to Lauren, who is going to explain our environmental mitigation program updates.
Hello, everyone. It's very good to see you all this morning, almost afternoon. I just wanted to give a little update on the environmental mitigation land management program. Currently in this reporting period, we have active 22 grants and one on the watch list that is currently closed. But once labor compliance issues close out, we'll completely end the project. Just a little project showcase. In this reporting period was the San Diego Habitat Conservancy Quarry Creek Preserve Fencing Project. This project was to reduce humus use in the riparian and coastal sage scrub area in North County. It was a wonderful project that's continuing. It will be closing later this year. The work that was completed was 91 volunteers for 4,000 pounds of trash were removed from this Quarry Creek Preserve, as well as to highlight the fact that due to the TransNet funding that was provided to San Diego Habitat Conservancy, other landowners as well as adjacent property owners gave funding to complete the fencing around the preserve. So it really highlights the really amazing gap funding that the EMP Land Management provides for land managers throughout the region. I will now pass it back to Ali.
All right, so I'll provide an update on our senior mini grant program for the April through September timeframe of 2023. The senior mini grant program, as Zach mentioned earlier, funds innovative transportation services for older adults in the region. And during the reporting period, we had 5 grants completed, and one grant was on the watch list, and that was facilitating access to coordinated transportation, or FACT. They had a grant that was on the watch list due to delayed deliverables and errors on their last quarterly invoice. And these delays have since been fixed. We received the report deliverables in late December, and the errors were fixed on their invoices as well. And here's a great photo of one of our programs, just to give them a spotlight for their service. This is Elder Help. That's currently one of our senior mini grantees. And this is a photo from their volunteer driver program that provides rides for seniors to go to the doctor, grocery store, or even lunch with friends. And so next I'll pass the mic to Jenny, my supervisor, to talk about the grants she's administrating right now.
Good morning, iTalk members. As an update for you on the Active Transportation Grant Program, or the ATGP, we have 2 projects that are active. One of them I'm going to talk about in a quick moment. And then one of those projects is on the watch list, which is the Carlsbad Boulevard and Tamarack project. You may be familiar with this. Some of you have been on iTalk for a little bit. We've had some previous amendments for this one. So probably the next time that I come here, they're going to be requesting another amendment. They're just not sure what that is. So just kind of wanted to highlight that particular project for you. And then for a mostly completed project, so this is the City of Santee's Prospect Avenue and Mesa Road intersection improvements. There's a school that's kind of on the left-hand side and a park that's adjacent to this project. So they did a number of sidewalk improvements, pedestrian upgrades, updating sight lines to the right. There's another busy, that's Prospect Avenue Road that comes into here. So really calming down the traffic in that area. So they completed the paving portion of it really in December. It's been striped since then, and they're taking it to City Council this month to have the notice of completion filed, and we'll formally close out the project after that. And then on the Smart Growth Incentive Program, our larger grant program, we have 12 active projects currently. 3 of those are on the watch list, as mentioned here on the slide. First is the City of El Cajon, their transit center connection improvements. You'll see kind of a theme that we're bringing to you. A lot of these projects are having issues with labor compliance. Really what the emphasis to make is that the issues that we're having are really on the contractor side, and we're catching those as we're going through and we're monitoring projects. So staying on top of that, highlighting what the problems are. If we need to file projects, Lauren mentioned one on her side, that we filed a complaint with the DIR and they're doing an investigation. Similar with the middle one that's on here, City of San Diego's Mobility Cycleway. This project was also reported to the DIR for an issue that the contractor had. So they're working through that. DIR has a huge backlog of complaints that they're trying to work on. We're hearing it's about 2 years potentially. So some of these, I'm apologizing if you see them again and again. It may be that long for them to kind of get closed. It's about a 6-month period sometimes to just get a caseworker assigned. And then they're really pretty quiet with us. They work directly with the contractor on those issues. So we don't always hear a lot of updates. We try to provide what we can in the reports. But just to highlight, that's really mostly what's going on with those 2. And then the last one, the City of Escondido, their general plan amendments. Many of our cities are having staffing shortages or turnover. So on this project, they've put that project on hold. They have not done any work on it in quite some time. So similar to the Carlsbad project I mentioned a moment ago, they will be requesting an amendment as soon as they get their staff member assigned and kind of reassess what the project timeline is going to look like. Then that will be brought forward to all of you to consider that. And then the last item on here that I'll mention a slide after this one is National City is requesting an amendment that we are asking for action from you today. And then on the showcase side, so this is the city of San Diego, their downtown wayfinding signage project. So that's right here. If you get a break to kind of walk around in the downtown area, you'll see signs like these. This is to complement their active transportation projects that they're doing in the region. They've put in a cycleway that many of you may have seen. So this is directional signage that shows folks like how to get around in downtown and where to see a lot of the different highlights things. So this is one that's just up here about 3 blocks away, showing the park and the zoo, but they go all the way down into East Village, so directing folks to the stadium, there's signage that takes you to the airport, those types of things. So I wanted to show this for you. This project's close, similar to be completed. Probably in the next report, we'll have that completed and closed out. So the last thing for you is this amendment. So this is for the City of National City. This is their Sweetwater Road Protected Bikeway Amendment. They are asking for a 6-month time extension. The reason for this amendment is they were doing their final site walk and kind of punch list items with the contractor in December, about 2 weeks before the grant was set to expire. And they noticed a number of things that were installed incorrectly. So they need to have the contractor go back out, fix those items. So that's really the reason for this request, is to allow that contractor to go correct the items, finish it, and have that project completed and open up to the public. So substantially complete. Luca is here behind me from the city. If you guys have any specific questions about what happened with the project or what's going on and what's to be looking forward to. And the reason I mentioned on here that it's retroactive, as I said, this was expected to be done and completed. When they were doing this final site walk, they caught this issue. So the grant did expire in the middle of December. So we need to reopen that, obviously, to allow them to be able to be reimbursed for the remaining balance of the grant. So that's the reason that that is noted here on the slide. And then I'll give it to Ali if you want to close this out.
Yes, well, thank you everybody for your time today. This concludes our presentation. I hope it kind of informed you about our grant programs that exist here and what our TransNet dollars are getting spent on. We're happy to answer any questions at this time. Just so you know, we will be coming back to you all to provide our next biannual report, and that will be in July of 2024. So you can learn more about what updates have happened since then in July. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you. We do have one public comment, the original draw. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Hey guys, been listening. I was on 2 other meetings, so I couldn't participate. I'm sure you're happy about that. But I do appreciate the way you were talking about seniors and wanting to help them, because that we do tend to, really do a disservice to our growing older population by way of always putting them in a home or something like that and leaving it up to, the community to take care of the people, which I guess, and because of that, it's good to have them have this transportation option. But I'm wondering, how well we are doing by giving them the information on it so that they can access it. If they don't have family that could possibly tell them about that, I just wonder how what we're doing and spending money to make sure that they have access to this and can, use it in a way that will help them live their life. Because I know a lot of times when you have an growing elder population, they tend to die quicker if they don't have the access to get out in the community and spend time with their friends and different things like that. So I do appreciate your the way you were talking about that in the previous item. But all of the habitat conservation that we're doing, I mean, if you guys looked into the United Nations sustainability plan, it talks about taking away the land from the people and the water and the different resources that we have. And so, I mean, on one hand, it's nice to preserve things, but not when it gets into a whole other agenda and we're actually keeping people off of the land, as if, there isn't enough land that is out there that we have to preserve some in a community, and then people can't access it. And we have to pay to, then put up a fence or whatever. So that tends to be something that I think is kind of nefarious, and it's bigger than what people understand it to be. And the Smart Growth Incentive Program, you know, you guys, SANDAG is spending time going and looking at property taxes in different areas so that they can get land so that you guys can basically build, you know, a smart community or city, 15-minute city on it, a complete community. And so in that, you're actually displacing people because, you know, and also making property taxes go up by bringing a bunch of stuff that like transportation that wasn't there. And a lot of people like to live out in these areas where there isn't stuff. You know, so we're using all of this to force people into a new way of life, especially when you're talking about traffic calming. You know, we're using funds for driving to de-incentivize people from driving and taking away their ability to freely access any area, especially with parking being taken out and stuff like that. So, you know, you call it active, but and whatever. I don't know.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to committee members for questions or comments.
I have a question, Rivera. On the paragraph 2 of the National City Letter, so maybe Luca might be the one to be able to provide more information on that one. It says that the error was that during the punch list walkthrough, that the asphalt berms along the city right-of-way and the striping and delineators installed in the Caltrans right-of-way were incorrectly installed. Was this an error in reading the construction drawings by the contractor and they were installed in the wrong location, but maybe we're going to see that same construction back? Or was there design standard changes? Give me more background on that. I've written it. It seems okay, but I just want to know what the nature of, a little bit more detail in the nature of the problem we have.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, that is correct. When we did the punch list walk that was back in November, we determined that the location in some cases for the AC berm and the delineators were incorrectly installed compared to what the plan was showing. Basically, we had to have meeting with the contractor showing the locations. And unfortunately, the timing, since in this case, we had the expiration on mid of December of the expiration of the grant. That's the reason why we requested this time extension. The project is completely was completed in the standpoint. That's why we did this punch list walk over on the area, but after we determined that in some location was wrongly installed by the contractor. The plan was there was no changing on the plans. It's just the contractor that made the mistakes.
All right. So will there be additional charge to National City or the grant program based on the fact that the contractor has owned up to the mistake?
No.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a follow-up question on that. How much is left to be paid to the city?
Yeah, the total project cost was over $4 million. The TransNet funding was approximately $2.5 million. We already used mostly of the funding. Now all the additional work are paid by city money, basically. Yeah, there is no money that we're going to request to the agency anymore because we already use most of the money.
So why the grant needs to be extended if there's no transit money?
Yeah, because
So we leave the grant open to make sure that it's completed, that they follow through. So even if there's no touch on money, and we're holding some, we hold retention on all of our projects, but we do extend them to give some incentive to be sure that's completed. So you don't end up with something out there that has an issue that doesn't get resolved. So yeah, it seems a little silly because there's not an impact on the budget, but that's the reason why, is that accountability.
Okay, so just to close it out, to record that it's closed out, we want to extend the grant to be able
Yes.
to. Okay.
And so when the project goes through a performance audit, you can show that it was completed in the same time frame.
I guess the main question for me is, was there any oversight on the contractor? Why did this mistake happen and was only caught in the punch list?
Yeah, unfortunately, we have, we have an inspector on site and didn't know that that kind of issue. When we had the punch list, basically we have several people involved in that on the punch list, including the project designer, and the project designer make that found out that kind of issues.
So are you saying your inspector was not experienced to notice this, or was he there, or he or she there or not? What was the reason?
Was there, and yeah. And there was some oversight from the inspector as well on some that were hard to find because unfortunately was part the designer was able to find that kind of issues.
So what lessons have you learned from this experience?
It's hard. For this experience, sometimes we have contractors that build the project without any kind of any issues, very on timing, and sometimes we have some contracts that we need to check on everything. That is sometimes making it harder. For this project, is a Myers project. Is a very extensive project, and very extensive project is built on Sweetwater Road. That's one of the busiest streets in National City. Unfortunately, that happened. Unfortunately, the construction, any project are different, and there is always lesson to learn. We learned that we need to be, we need to be more on top on these kind of issues. Unfortunately.
Well, I hope so. So this doesn't happen again. Appreciate it. Thank you, Luca. I have other questions on the other projects, but I'll let anybody.
Oh, no, go ahead. I have questions.
On this project?
Yes.
Go ahead and finish this one.
It was the inspector city staff or a consultant?
A consultant.
It happens, Sonny.
That's easy.
Okay, any other, I think we'll stick with the National City project here in their request. Any other questions or comments relative to the extension request from National City? Okay, and just one clarification for staff. The city has received 2 prior extensions on this project, correct? And the reason that we're here is because this 3rd extension takes us beyond the 16-month thresholds, whereby we need a policy committee to approve the extension.
Correct. It's the aggregate time extension that you're approving because it's missed the milestone that's set in the policy. Normally, we have 12 months at the staff level that we would give, so we don't bother you with small things like this, but that's the reason why.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, do we have a motion related to the extension request?
Jonathan, I have other questions on other projects in the grant, in the presentation. National City.
Why don't you go ahead, Sonny? Thank you.
City of Escondido. It's a little bit kind of uncertain. You're going to delay or extend a grant until the city finds the right staffing. And it says critical staff. So is it a possibility to just not renew and have the city come back when they're ready? Because there's no guarantee they're going to find someone within the next 6 months. I mean, why do we do that?
Yeah, so they lost in their planning department. They lost their main city planner and their, I think, principal level planners. That's really the reason why they have one person that remains that's kind of overseeing that. They've started that recruitment. They were waiting for the holidays to pass.
Okay.
They will fill that position. It is a question though, like we don't have to approve the amendment. We could allow the project to lapse. The funds would return to the program and they could compete again. That's an option for all of you.
Okay, to me, that's a preference, you know, and I know it's not easy to go through the application process and there's no guarantee they will win it again. But to me, releasing that fund for other purposes for now, because there's no guarantee with the way resource and staffing is, and, you know, everyone, including the cities, are having such a hard time finding the right people. Would the 6-month delay is it 6 months?
We don't know yet. So they haven't given an option yet.
Okay.
It's just flagged for you. So you know, here's a project that hasn't.
Well, my preference would be they come back and do it, redo it. City of Carlsbad, there wasn't really an explanation why we're getting another request for another extension. Can you explain? There was no letter or anything attached.
Correct. This one is similar to Escondido. They haven't made a formal request. The reason that I flagged it is based on their schedule. They should be about 85% complete because we've funded through the final construction, and the most current deliverable we have is 60% design. So there's no way that they're going to meet that timeline. We don't know yet from staff what that future extension will be, but because we've given them, you've all approved and the board has approved 2 3-year extensions prior, that puts this project at 9 years out from the initial date. That's why I wanted to kind of show this is coming. This is a big amendment. I know we've had concerns about it in the past.
So you flagged it, but the only one we're recommending, if any, for the extension would be City of National City.
Correct. They're the only one that have one on the table.
Thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
That's all I have.
I don't have a comment. I mean, a question. I have a comment on the city of San Diego, the beautiful wayfinding signs. Can you ask them to put distance to those locations, please? As I'm walking, I see them, but I don't know if it's half a mile, a third of a mile, or 20 miles. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this item? No, seeing none. Do I have a motion regarding the extension request by National City?
I'll move that.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the 6-month extension request from the City of National City. Motion by Mr. Orso Delgado and a second by Ms. Pavaki. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. For Biology Environmental, Lorraine Alquist. Approve. For CEO Private Sector, Sunny House.
Approve. Just want to clarify, we're recommending, we're not really approving, correct?
That is correct. This is a recommendation. The motion would be to recommend that the Transportation Committee approve.
Okay, approved.
Thank you. For Contractor Construction, Vice Chair Orso Delgado.
Yes.
For Finance Budgeting, Mariam Babaki.
Yes.
For Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer, Frank Rivera.
Approve.
For Licensed Engineer, Les Hopper.
Approve.
And for Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Approve.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you so much. That concludes the report items on today's agenda. As an informational item, our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 14th. And I look forward to being with all of you in person. Thank you to my colleagues for allowing me to attend remotely today. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone.
Chair, are you bringing chocolates to all of us for Valentine's Day?
We will see, Pedro. Maybe just for you, Pedro. Just for you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.